So welcome to SPNN. My name is Martin Ludden. I'm the executive director here. I am always happy to have a bunch of St. Paulites in our space. Please don't let this be the last time you're here. Our mission is to empower people to make better lives, build common understanding, and use authentic voice. And I think voting is a big part of using your authentic voice. And this, what we're doing right here, is building common understanding. So thank you for coming out to participate in that process. Thank you to the League of Women Voters St. Paul for being a fantastic partner and organizer for the event. Thank you to the candidates for giving us your time, not just tonight, but over the course of a long campaign, and for stepping up to be volunteers in the public service. So thank you for that. I'm going to get out of the way and turn it over to Sarah Risser from the League, who will be our moderator tonight.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank our candidates for being here and everybody in the audience for taking the time to come out tonight and listen to the views of our three candidates. My name is Sarah Risser, and I'm a past member of the League of Women Voters St. Paul. I will be your moderator tonight. Tonight's forum is sponsored by the St. Paul Neighborhood Network and the League of Women Voters St. Paul. A special election is being held on August 14 to fill Russ Stark's seat, which is currently being held by interim city council member Samantha Henningsen. St. Paul's Ward 4 is the only ward with a seat up for election at this time. City council members are elected to a 4-year term, during which they are responsible for setting policy through ordinances and resolutions. The council also has the sole responsibility for adopting the city's budget, making performance auditing decisions, and monitoring the operation and performance of city agencies. It holds regular oversight hearings to determine how programs are working and whether budgeted funds are being spent well. We believe that the success of our city depends on the values, knowledge, and commitment of our elected officials. Thus, it is essential for the public to better understand the views, opinions, and commitments of people running for elected office in Minnesota. It is this understanding that better equips voters to make informed voting decisions. We believe all candidates deserve to be heard and would like to thank the candidates again for taking the time to be here tonight. We ask that you all be respectful of one another and of the candidates. Disruptive behavior such as name-calling, personal attacks, talking out of turn, or not abiding by timekeeping rules will result in being asked to leave the forum. All candidates have agreed to the forum rules, and I will review them briefly before we begin. The forum will begin with each candidate giving a 2-minute introductory statement. The order in which they speak has been randomly determined. After the introductory statements, the question and answer portion of tonight's forum will begin. The candidates will have 1 minute each to respond to the questions asked. After the question and answer session, each candidate will be given another 2-minute closing statement. A timer will signal when they have 15 seconds remaining and when their time is up. We will accept written questions throughout the forum. Cards and pencils have been made available. Once you have written a question on your card, hold it up, and a volunteer will collect that question and bring it up to be read. Questions that are of a personal nature, hostile, or unclear in intent will not be asked. Similar questions may be consolidated, and questions may be edited for clarity or brevity. Campaign literature, buttons, signs, clothing, or any other campaign-related item are not allowed in the room, but information on candidates is available on tables outside the forum. At this time, please turn off cell phones, and I would ask that everyone be quiet so that everyone may hear. Please hold your applause until the forum has ended so that candidates will have as much time as possible to answer your questions. With that, we will start with opening statements. So, candidates, you each have 2 minutes for your opening statement, and we will begin with David. By the way, the candidates have agreed that referring to them by a first name basis is okay. So David will begin with his 2-minute opening statement.
Good evening, everyone. So many of you have a perception of who I am based on, what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks since I've been in the news? I'm almost 39 years old, so I'm going to start off with a math problem for those of you mathematicians or educators in the room. So there are 365 days in a year. I'm turning 39 in like 3 months. So that's 14,245 days that I've been alive. There are 24 hours in a day. That's 341,880 hours. You following me? There are 60 minutes in an hour. That's 20,512,800 minutes that I've been alive. So the 3 weeks that I've been in the news is 0.00008% of my total lived experience. So please, don't judge me on 1/8 of my existence on this planet. I've spent more time doing like everything else than what you've seen in the news over the last 3 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Mitra.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Mitra Jalali Nelson, and I am really excited to be running to represent our ward, Ward 4, on the St. Paul City Council. And I am running to bring my lifetime of experiences to this work. I am running as a lifelong Minnesotan, someone who was born and raised in our home state, who is proud to call St. Paul my home and has chosen this as the city I'm going to make my family and my community for life. I am running as a proud daughter of immigrants from 2 different countries. I am running as a former classroom teacher of 3 years, teaching middle and high school social studies, and I am running as an organizer who fought for school funding after seeing in the classroom what the needs are for our communities and helped successfully pass the 2012 referendum as part of the St. Paul Public Schools and SPFT campaign to do that. And I'm running as someone who has worked in policy and constituent services for the past 3 years of my career. I have been working most recently with Congressman Keith Ellison, and I drive our office outreach and constituent work around immigration and refugee issues, and I also work on public safety. And I'm running because I fundamentally believe that the future of our city is connected to the future of our ward, to this race, this election, and the issues that we are facing as a community that are playing out across our specific ward and our city. I am running as a renter who is working and passionate about uplifting the voices of people in every living situation to take on our citywide affordable housing shortage. And in a city where we're at a tipping point and half of our community is renting, and yet we don't have any renter representation yet on the council, I'm running to break that reality and bring some new voice to the conversation. And I'm also running because I'd love to build on and expand on the work that our predecessor, Russ Stark, championed to achieve true community-first public safety, to build our city through inclusive transit, and protect our environmental health, and also to continue to grow our local economy and nurture our local small businesses. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm grateful for all of your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitra. Shirley.
I'm Shirley Erstad, and I'm running for Ward 4 City Council as somebody who is not from here. I moved here with my family when my husband and I had 2 small children 25 years ago. We moved to St. Paul because he received a scholarship to the U of M Law School, and we asked them, well, where should we live? And they said, you're going to love St. Paul because they have great neighborhoods. And he was right, and so we've lived here for almost half my life now. I'm a farm kid, and what that means to me is that when there's work to be done, you dig in and you do it. When somebody needs help, you help them. Those are the values that I've lived with my entire life. When I was a young mother nearly 30 years ago, I put my baby in the stroller and I marched for human rights. I have been a mentor to teenage mothers. I've helped work in homeless shelters, and I have done the many things that folks do when they live in St. Paul as a family. We attended early childhood family education. My kids went to Parks and Recreation Center programming. They swam synchronized swimming through community ed programming. We participated in summer reading programs at the library. All of the things that that the St. Paul City Council has a large effect on when we choose our budget and we choose our priorities. My kids grew up in the St. Paul public school system. They're all bilingual, and one of them right now lives in Panama, where her significant other only speaks Spanish, so I guess I need to get to be bilingual too. The reason I'm running is because I love St. Paul. This is my home. And I have worked my entire life to move beyond labels and to break down barriers and to build coalitions to get things done. This community welcomed me when I was a stranger here, and I think that that's how this community wants to be. It has a long history. We are the capital city of Minnesota, one of the most welcoming states in the nation. And I really believe that our community voices that I'm hearing is that I'm knocking on doors. People want to be involved and we want to do the right thing. And I'm really excited to be a part of that.
Thank you. Thank you for your opening statements. We're now going to move on to the question and answer period, and we'll popcorn around so that the order in which the candidates answer the question is switched up with each question. So the first question has to do with housing in St. Paul. I think we would all agree that St. Paul has a housing crisis in that the number of new residents exceeds the additional housing units that have been made available. Given this, could you please speak to how important it is to ensure that new housing projects are in keeping with the character of the neighborhood? And adding on to that, how important is historic preservation? And we're going to start with Mitra.
For me, affordable housing issues are what propelled me into this race. Looking around where I live near Raymond and University, being fortunate to live along the train and benefit from public investments we've made to grow our city. And I think we are growing our city right now in a healthy way, but we are also facing the potential of falling behind. We have 20,000 new residents in our city, as the question implied. We have only about 4,000 new places for people to live. And I'm running because I want to create homes for everyone across our city. I think there's many, many different kinds of living situations in which you can have a dignified quality of life, and that above all, you cannot consider a city livable if you cannot consider affording to live there if you are priced out. And so I think that this is a central issue facing our community. I think that we have to build for the future. I think that we have to know where we've been in order to evolve toward where we're going, and that we can maintain our history, our community story, and keep writing that next chapter together. All those things can be true, and that includes historic preservation, that includes creating new places for people to live going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
This is 2 minutes again?
This is 1 minute,
minute
for the question and answer.
All right, here we go. So I was evicted from my home that I've helped build over the past 13 years. So I was homeless 2 weeks ago. I slept in my car. 24 hours after being evicted from my home, I had secured a new place for $600 a month. I have a list in my notebook of about 25 places that are renting right now, affordable, under $800 a month. So when the city council and my opponents here say that there's a housing shortage, that it's unaffordable, I say BS.
Thank you. Shirley?
Well, there is a lot that can be done to address affordable housing issues. And one of the things we need to keep in mind as we do this is that this is a countrywide issue. Only 1 in 4 people right now who are qualified for housing assistance under our federal government are getting it. So we need to take this message above and beyond just this room and this conversation. One of the things the city of St. Paul did just a week ago is the city council passed about a 3-page resolution on things that we want to do to address our housing issues in the city. Having an affordable housing trust fund was one, having a down payment assistance program is another, and having an emergency funding source so that if there is like a water break in an apartment building, that the tenants in that apartment building aren't suddenly finding themselves homeless. When I read that resolution, because I have a record of reading documents and then asking questions, and when I read that resolution, the final resolution said that we were going to be setting up a housing stability advisory group with advocates and experts, but it left off homeowners, so I asked for that.
Thank you. The next question has to do with minimum wage. It is very likely, it's possible, that St. Paul will increase minimum wage to $15 per hour. The question is, Are there any downsides to this? And in addition to that, should there be any carve-outs? And we're going to start with Shirley.
Well, my philosophy of government is that it should be representative government and that we let community process play out. And the current city council and the mayor have asked the Citizens League to do a community process of how we do this best for St. Paul. So it's easy to run on slogans, but it's another thing to govern. And so rather than saying here tonight that I have the answer for how we should do this, I want to see what the Citizens League report is going to tell us in September. I want to listen to the community. I've been hearing from businesses what their concerns are. I've been hearing from folks who are trying to live on minimum wage what their concerns are. And this is a very complicated issue that we need to get right for our city and not do it the way another city did it, because we have the responsibility of taking care of St. Paul. And so I want to have the community voices be heard, because otherwise it's antithetical to the reason I'm even running.
Thank you. David.
So the Citizens League report is skewed right out of the gate. You got people on that committee chairing and co-chairing it who are professional lobbyists and manipulators. The mayor has said we want $15 an hour. Guess what? $15 an hour is coming to St. Paul, period, regardless of who you vote for, okay? Because that's the way things run in St. Paul. If the political elite want it done, it's gonna be done. And if you say something about it, off to jail you go. Talk to me about that. That's it.
Thank you. Mitra.
I have supported a $15 minimum wage for our city without any exemptions since the beginning of this campaign. I've never wavered from that position. That is fundamentally what I believe our city needs right now. Right now, 1 in 4 workers in our city are working in low-wage jobs below that rate that have the potential to get a significant raise that would fundamentally transform their ability to cover the cost of living. 1 in 4 workers in our city. I think that looking at national trends and how that's reflected locally, we've seen wages decline and decline and decline due to a whole number of other factors. And one of the surest ways that we can stop the decline is if we pour cement under our feet of sinking wages and say the baseline is 15, and we're going to move forward in that. The question to me for our city should be how. It should be talking about a thoughtful phase-in. It should be figuring out how to make sure bigger players are accountable, because they're oftentimes better positioned to absorb that kind of a change than smaller players and small businesses that are the strength of our communities in a weaker downtown system. And so I'm interested in engaging those conversations and bring my background as an organizer to that process. That's my position. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. We've had a lot of questions on trash and trash collection. So we have to be sure to cover this one. As a new city council member, if given the opportunity, will you support or oppose the implementation of the city's new organized trash collection program? And we're going to start with David.
I talked to my trash collector of 13 years, and you know what they told me? David, the city told me if I say anything about their plan, we are out of St. Paul. They said, you will never do business in St. Paul again. This is a 4-generation business, and that's how the city treats them. So the little that I got out of her was there's a gag order on us and all of the other trash collectors in the city. So there's nothing we can say. So talk to Russ Stark. He's in the back of the room. He can tell you how these inner workings work in St. Paul and how they gag people so you can't say anything in the city.
Thank you. Mitra.
I've heard a lot about trash on the doors. And it has been a good listening experience to understand how we've worked to consolidate something that's a basic city service that was happening in a piecemeal way, and we're trying to evolve towards something centralized and that is just a basic function of what a city should be able to provide. I've heard stories from people like how the new bin system means that they have to upcharge and add that onto the cost of their tenants and the rent that they pay. We're hearing stories from people about just other similar pains in the rollout, things that we're working through, and we're in a 5-year process now to implement it and figure out how we can iron it out and improvement. improve it. And I would really like to figure out how we can use those 5 years to best work through those issues. The central, one of the central reasons behind the need to make this transition is that there are folks who didn't have a clear way to dispose their trash and were disposing it in ways that were hazardous or unsafe. There were a myriad of trucks rumbling around our city, tearing up the roads and streets and incurring costs that are of a long-term detriment to our community. So we need to work it out. I would support moving forward.
Thank you. Shirley.
So this is a really good example of why I'm running for city council, is because we have a really good idea, and then along the way we forget what the goal is. We don't listen to the community, and then we end up with this, as some have been calling it to me, disorganized trash. So another issue that people have had is with the apartment buildings that need to have now a container for every unit. And I live next to an apartment building, and I'm not quite sure how we're going to get our alley plowed with all of the different containers as well as all of the different recycling containers. So this is a fine example to me of where we need to have people at the table who are willing to ask the tough questions and who are willing to stand up and say, you know, there are other things that we should be considering here, and have we actually listened to the concerns of the neighborhoods and the taxpayers who are going to be paying for this rollout.
Thank you. Excuse me. So we all know there have been numerous officer-involved shootings throughout the country, and even here in our backyard there have been a couple of instances. So the question is this: how would you characterize the relationship, specifically thinking about the St. Paul police force in the community? How would you characterize that relationship? And in what ways, if any, do you feel that they stand out in both a positive and potentially negative way? We're going to start with Mitra.
This is something that I am extremely interested to work on as a council member, as someone who believes councilperson's role is to surface community input and bring it directly to the administration, which in this instance has oversight and a lot of direct input on the St. Paul Police Department. I am deeply concerned about disproportionate racialized policing in our city. And I think that there are efforts that SPPD is making to be more open. They asked this week, in the last several days, to give input on a new policy that they're trying to draft about gender nonconforming individuals, something that I've been pushing for since the beginning of this campaign. So there's a sign of intention and wanting to work toward it. And at the same time, the surest way that we restore trust is that we work toward investing in our futures and doing things like supporting funding for rec centers and things that support our youth versus funding for more officers when we're working through fundamental questions of trust and responsibility. So I think that the relationship could grow and improve. I'm hoping to be an ameliorator for that and a voice on the council.
Great. Thank you. Shirley.
Well, I do feel like we have really good communication between Chief Axtell and Mayor Melvin Carter, and I'd like to see that continue. Their work on the use of force policy was one of the first things that they did together, and to me, language really matters. And so just changing it from a suspect to a person, I really think that language helps, as well as this is a very personal issue for me. I have a young black woman living in my house with her brand new baby, and the father of the baby can't visit us because there is concern if there were to be shouting and the police were to be called, what that would mean for him. And I don't want him to end up as another story in the newspaper. I also have been a victim of violence myself, and so I know what it means to rely on a police department to keep me safe. So these are issues that are fundamental to what we believe in as a society and the values that we hold, and that we aren't polarizing, because I've been seeing way too many stories of, well, we don't want more police officers, or we do want more police officers, and I think we really need to have the conversation in the middle.
Thank you. David.
So my mic, there it is. I think I'm the only person ever in history to run for city council and like be arrested and spend 48 hours in jail in St. Paul. I think, I don't know, maybe Russ can tell us. But so I've been through the process, and they treat you like an animal. They treated all of us like animals in there. So Chief Axtell is out and about doing his little barbecues and community liaisoning. Great. Good job, Todd. Why don't you talk to the rest of your team who don't understand what we're trying to do here? I can't even begin to tell you the inhumanity that exists in the Ramsey County and the St. Paul Police correctional system. It's sickening. And if I'm elected, I'm going to go back in there and I'm going to sit every one of those guys down and say, you remember me? You remember me? All right, now we're going to talk.
Great, thank you. Moving on to a more administrative question. District councils. The question is, do you support the 17 district councils as key advisors? How would you utilize them? How would you work with them? How would you be effective? And we will start with Shirley.
I've served on my district council for 3 terms now, and I really see us as siblings. I mean, the city council and the district council working together, because 40 years ago when Ruby Hunt was one of the main folks who got the district council system going, the vision that she had is the vision that I share, that there are a great space for community voices to be heard, and that rather than having 7 people sitting around a city council table, we can have 7 people sitting around a council table and have 17 city council meetings happening, as well as their land use committee and their transportation committee. And I served on the executive committee of mine and the environment and parks committee. And there, again, as I said in my opening, people want to be involved. Like, this is a city of folks who really care about their communities, and I think that we have been underutilizing our district council system, and that to really look at it as being partners and a way to get more community voices at the table, because in the end, this is our city. We are St. Paul.
Thank you, Shirley. Mitra.
I've gotten to sit and talk to district council members, past, former, present, throughout the course of this campaign, and oftentimes they are the deepest source of knowledge about what is happening block by block in our communities. One of the ways that I would really like to support the councils in continuing to improve representation for everyone is to fund the organizing that it really takes to get everyone at the table. It varies across the city, but there are many councils that lag in representation for underrepresented groups, people of color, younger people, students, renters, people from a range of backgrounds that lots of times don't know that system exists, aren't aware of how to use it to improve our community. And we need to make sure that it's funded with goals tied to representation to support that work. So I would really like to see the district councils continue to evolve. I hope to lean on them as a council person. And I also think being a council member means using your convening power to create places to convene community outside of it too.
Thank you. David.
So, Mitra, I'm a renter now. Shirley, you want to learn Spanish? Yo te puedo enseñar español para que puedas ir a Panamá y puedas hablar con el muchacho. 17 district councils, or those councils are extensions of the corrupt elected officials we have today. Some of them are so powerful that they can say, we're going to have organized trash collection. Who drove that thing? The Matt Groveland Council. So these councils are supposed to be independent entities that then inform the city based on what the residents say. Well, that's not the way it works. The councils are in bed with the city, and then they tell the residents what's going to happen. Are they useful? Yeah. Here, I won a mini arts grant before all this mess happened. I was going to create little boards for kids, and now the Hamlin Midway Coalition says we're revoking that. Why?
Thank you. The next question is on the new stadium. To what extent would you say the new stadium is a complete asset to St. Paul? Are there any liabilities? If so, would you characterize those and explain how you would address them? We're going to start with David.
Russ and I sat down before the stadium was finalized, and I said, Russ, the stadium's a great idea if we get benefits from Bill McGuire. He's a super rich guy. That guy could rebuild all of St. Paul on his own, period. Yet, we lure him in with all these little bonuses in perpetuity. A man that has more money than all of us and all of our families combined. Why are we doing that? Oh, I don't know. So I say to Russ, do the stadium. A lot of kids love soccer. A lot of immigrant kids love soccer. Make sure that Bill gives us 300 tickets every year so then we can use them as incentives to get these kids to graduate high school. Did Russ do that? I don't think so.
Thank you, Shirley.
Well, we have the soccer stadium. It's not far away from my house. So let's all hope that it succeeds because it would be a community benefit if it does. One of the things that I would have pushed for had I been in that room at the city council was that if we're going to have the noise and we are going to have the traffic, which we will, then let's also make part of the deal that Minnesota United moves its corporate headquarters to that site, because part of the sales pitch, part of the idea was that this was going to be a generator for economic development. That would have meant good paying jobs, full-time, year-round, and those folks would then be supporting our local businesses. We'd also then have a building that we're hoping to have of office space with parking ramps, so that on game days, then they can use that parking. So that's how I think. I ask questions of, well, what have we not looked for? What kind of more community benefit can we ask for? And how can we negotiate a better deal? We also...
Mitra.
I'm excited about the potential of the stadium, and I think we need really watchful, engaged, and committed council leadership who's willing to really open up communication and make sure it can benefit our community. I think that we have a chance to prove how to do a stadium the right way, that we have one of the most transit-connected stadiums in the state, that we can show how to promote public transit and game day safety in a really healthy, community-centered way, not the militarization of large-scale sporting events that we sometimes see and have seen it as extreme with the Super Bowl visiting town. I would really like to use the stadium to drive economic development in Hamlin Midway. I think that there will be thousands and thousands of visitors to local businesses that need to know about local shops that they can support, local history that they can be part of. I think that the way that you do that is you bring the community to the table and you ask them to work with you on how to make sure that benefits them. And so part of the change in our ward that I think is coming is related to that. I would like to be very engaged around it and support our community and make sure it's benefiting everyone.
Great, thank you. This is a question a little bit more personal. How long have you lived in Ward 4, and why did you choose this community? What drew you to Ward 4? And we will start with Mitra.
I've been living in Ward 4 since summer 2016. I am excited to live where I live because I live along the Green Line, right at the Raymond and University stop. And I was able to live where I live also in part because of investments we made in housing that's connected to transit. When I look around, I see lots of change and development happening in that same neighborhood. My backyard is a construction site, and this is one of the key things that really propelled me into the race is being someone coming from a perspective who has chosen to make St. Paul their home community, was born and raised here, has a decade of experience organizing across the Twin Cities, and is hoping to be new representative leadership for the future of our city. I think that we're in a really exciting moment as a city right now to bring in new voices and new perspectives, and I would love to be that voice for everyone on our ward and with our ward on the council.
Great, thank you. David.
I've lived in Ward 4 13 years. I moved back here from DC after my ex-wife finished her master's degree. We chose the Newell Park neighborhood because Newell Park is beautiful. So now I don't get to go back there anymore, but you open the shades and there's a bay window and you look at Newell Park. I have 2 kids in a Ward 4 school. And then I, too, Mitra, got in this race because of this issue. Because in 2017, right before Russ took a $60,000 promotion, he came in with the city and said, we're going to put a dog park at Newell Park. What? You're going to destroy this park with a dog park? Are you kidding me? We push back, and there's no dog park, but it's on the shelf. If somebody else up here gets elected, that dog park's going in. So tell your friends that live in Newell Park that there's a dog park coming, unless David Martinez gets elected.
Okay, thank you. Shirley.
So we moved to St. Paul 25 years ago. We actually moved to the Mac Groveland area 25 years ago. We rented there a duplex across from Cretin-Durham High School for the first 5 years that we were here in St. Paul. So I looked across the street to Paul Molitor's baseball card for 5 years. So even though I've never met him, I kind of feel like I know him. So then 20 years ago, we had our 3rd child, and we were living in this really teeny tiny place. So we bought a fixer-upper in Merriam Park. that we were really fortunate to find. And that often is the case for how people buy their first home is a fixer-upper. So that's what we did, and the litany of activities that I listed earlier that we've taken part in St. Paul, raising our family here. One of the things that I did do that caused me great anxiety was I dug up our front yard and put pollinator plants in it 20 years ago. And that wasn't really the thing that you did then. So I truly did have some sleepless nights that my neighbors were going to think I was insane. But the most we've counted now are 50 monarchs at one time. So it's become a community gathering spot.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Also, quite a few questions on expressing concern on Newell Park and wondering what you will do to ensure that Newell Park is preserved and to address railroad noise and other pollutants that are threatening the park. We'll start with Shirley.
So I love parks questions because I'm executive director of a nonprofit. It's Friends of the Parks and Trails of St. Paul and Ramsey County. And I took that job 5 years ago. And one of the things we do is we facilitate donations to parks. Newell Park is the #1 park location where people request to donate a tree because they love that park. It's that beautiful oak savanna. And I always have to tell them, I'm sorry, but we can't put any more trees there because the Parks Department says it's already mature and it's full. The #1 thing that I would do in maintaining Newell Park is what I would do with everything, is listening to the community. So when David mentioned that if the rest of us or either of us got elected, that Newell Park would automatically become a dog park, that's not correct. For me, there would not be a master plan that gets dropped into the neighborhood. This would be a community process on what would people want to see there, rather than looking at where we need a dog park and say, okay, that's a great place. That's not how I do business. And with the pollution there, yeah.
Okay, David.
Wow, that was kind of interesting timing. I drove a few years ago along the north road, the north side of Newell Park. That's what, Pierce Butler? And there's so many trucks coming out of there that they eat up the road. Huge pothole. My car hits the pothole, bends my rim, tire deflates. I call the city. Sorry, you should have swerved. Really? Okay, $300 later, I get my car fixed, and a week later, the pothole is fixed. Okay, that's interesting. Do you know that it's illegal to climb trees in St. Paul? Like if you were to be caught climbing trees at Newell Park, which I do with my kids all the time, until I read the city ordinances and found out it's illegal. So the cops could come by and say, you're climbing a tree. That's illegal in St. Paul. You're going to jail. Don't climb the trees. The city planner that is supposed to get community input on these decisions doesn't really get community input on these decisions. So if you're elected, Shirley,
David,
go
that's
down.
time.
That's
Thank
time.
you. Mitra.
And Mike Ham is married to Amy Brenmoen. No conflict of interest.
So I think that this is a good example of a situation in which you go directly to those immediately impacted and you ask for the full range of input, the good, bad, and the ugly. You listen to people who maybe fiercely disagree with each other. You look at the resources available and the plans that are existing and in place and the priorities that are underneath them, and you think about what would be the most sensible decision. I've gotten to door knock around Newell Park and have heard from folks about their concerns regarding the proposal. I think that a good council person is really willing to be patient in that process, diligent, hear it out, and think about what are the balancing needs that we need to meet here and how do we fit those together. There's also been discussion around the noise and the pollution and the rattling of the trains, and there's a lot of things that I think can be thematic in parts of our ward because we have a lot of industrial zones that I think that we need to think about developing smartly to support our city, but also can have impacts on residents. And so the conversation becomes, how can you balance those needs, right? Are there sensible barriers that we can put up that are in tune with what the community wants and needs to do that? Those are the kind of questions I'd ask and the approach I would take.
Great. Thank you. Continuing to think about the environment, in this age of climate change, cities can potentially play a very significant role in fighting climate change and promoting sustainability. So what plans would you support to make St. Paul a leader in fighting climate change? We'll start with David.
So I drove for Metro Transit a year ago. You know how many miles per gallon those buses get? 4. You know how many miles the electric hybrid buses get? 5. And then this new entity comes into town and brings these like electric scooters, Bird or whatever they're called. And the city says, no, we want those out. Are you kidding me? What? That's the coolest thing I've ever heard of any city doing. And my buddy, Jonathan Weinhagen over in Minneapolis is, I think, one of the people that brought those here to the Twin Cities. So good for you, Jonathan. Now you got to convince my buddy Russ Stark to let him stay. And get some real fuel-efficient buses in here.
Mitra.
There's a lot of things I think we could do to reduce our climate impact as a city. We're working with Xcel Energy right now as a city to get them to make changes to the way that they're doing business so that we can start to reach our goals of reducing our impact. I think there's a lot of smaller scale things that are around our culture of organizing development around cars that actually have bearing and impact for how our city succeeds from a climate health standpoint. There's a lot of infrastructure that is supporting less cars on the road, which are better for cars themselves because that means there's less traffic, and that are better for people wanting to live here and have a number of ways to get around our city. I would really be excited to work on great streets for our city through funding the rest of the bike plan, working with the Bike Coalition and other biker groups to be able to make those things a reality. Things that could save our city millions of dollars, like curbside composting and figuring out how we can reduce just the number of waste that we're creating. Looking at city services as an opportunity to do that and save money and fuel our economy and our future. So those are just some of the things that I support. I couldn't possibly say them all in 1 minute, so hope that I did okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Shirley.
Well, community solar, I know, is one thing that's really on the top of the table right now, as well as that when we are putting in transit-oriented development, one of the things that I would keep talking about is, are we prioritizing then actual transit? Because right now, if we gave a bus pass to every one of our high school students, we wouldn't have enough buses. So just, again, looking at the big picture and asking the details. And then from just a climate perspective, and when we talk about environmental justice, that we hold cities accountable to what they preach, that it actually is in their action. So that was one of my questions on the Ford site plan, is that the pollution in Area C in the floodplain, the city kept saying it was one of their top priorities. And then when it came time to pass the plan, Area C fell off the table. And I was standing up and saying, no, what about Area C? There's pollution in the floodplain that the reports are saying it's still too hazardous for people to be in there. So I think that we really need city leaders who are willing to actually dig in and do the work and hold people accountable and not just say that there are values and then not carry through.
Thank you. And that's a good segue to the next question, which is on the Ford site. How will you influence the development of the Ford site, and do you support increment financing? Why or why not? We'll start with Mitra.
I'm excited about the Ford site as an example of how to get at the kind of development that I think can really propel our city forward. This is a historic site that we decided to redesign and use to create up to 4,000 new units with a goal of 20% of them being affordable. When you think about how there's 20,000 new residents in our city and we've only created about 4,000 new places for them to live, this could make a really huge dent in that and start to ease the citywide vacancy rate and start to address some of these other things that we're seeing. I think that it is going to be really important going forward to engage with Ryan Companies, who's working with the community on the site, working with resident input in the surrounding areas that might be impacted to really bring our voice to the table on realizing the potential of this project. I support tax increment financing in instances where it can be a way to do the infrastructure cleanup that's needed to make some of these bigger, larger scale projects possible. And I also support using our zoning code to ask for more benefits from those same large scale projects like how we did with the site. So that's how I'm thinking about it, and I hope to keep the conversation going with community so it can benefit everyone.
Great, thank you. Shirley.
So this is like a 20-minute question, so I really can try to condense. So tax increment financing. One of the things that we don't talk about is that when we do those projects, we are also taking money away from our school district and from our Ramsey County, which does our social services. So I'm bringing that into the conversation, that every time we're doing one of those districts that, by the way, are written for 20 to 25 years, so we're talking about the next generation, that we have all the information on the table, and then when we make a decision, we know what we're deciding for. The Parkland Dedication Ordinance throughout the city, I worked on that in 2014 and 2015. I know that there's a buyout clause in there, and so if when we're looking at all the nice pictures for the Ford site plan, that there are the parks there, and the community is expecting that there's going to be parks there. And we know that renters are more likely to be people of color. So that means that if we aren't putting in adequate park space when we're building apartment buildings, it's disproportionately negatively affecting people of color. And if they don't, the kids who have access to green space do better in school. They're more likely to make more livable wages when they're older and become our next community leaders. So this is the way in which I draw connections and how our systems are perpetuating cycles of inequality.
Thank you. David.
So in 2015, I graduated from a program called the Boards and Commissions Leadership Institute. It's a program intended to get more people of color on boards and commissions in Ramsey County and St. Paul. As part of that year-long training, I and my classmates, all 15 of us, conducted like a mock study of the Ford plant. We talked to the planners, we talked to people in the finance department in St. Paul, we talked to the very involved and very articulate and very intelligent people of the Highland Park area. Chris Tolbert, I think, denied the invitation because he's got his own agenda, but this is an instance where the community council and the community is so powerful in Highland Park that they're pushing back against the city. And the city's not going to be able to railroad them, so good for you. I think, and I have a proposal that we drafted in this BCLI program where it's like a technology manufacturing innovation center surrounded by public space where people can be.
Thank you.
No TIF. No TIF for that.
Thank you. Excuse me. A large percentage of the residents of St. Paul are non-white and or mixed race or immigrants. So please speak a little bit about how you could represent diverse voices as a city council person. And we'll start with Shirley.
Well, I can only be me. I can't be somebody that I'm not, but I have dedicated my life to moving beyond labels and breaking down barriers. I was born a girl child in a place where the only expectation for me was to grow up and have babies. And I felt like I had more to give to the world than that. And moving beyond that and finding my own way in the world and recognizing that there are systems that we put in place to promote what society thinks that people should do. I worked, as David said, with the boards and commissions. When I recognized that the 21-member planning commission had 9 vacancies and nobody was on there from Ward 4, and that the 30 boards and commissions in our city were operating at well below capacity, I worked for 18 months in my volunteer time to get more diverse voices at the table. So that's the way I think, that's the way that I approach the world, and that's who I am.
Great, thank you. Mitra.
I'm running to bring my direct lived experiences to our council that currently lags in representation for people of color as one of many things that I hope to bring to the council. I am from a family that is from essentially refugee and immigrant backgrounds of 2 different places. My dad is from Iran. He immigrated to Minnesota in 1979, as many Iranian Americans did, fleeing the Iranian Revolution. And he relocated to Rochester and then to the Twin Cities, where he had me with my mom, who's a Korean adoptee and was born and raised in Seoul in an orphanage, and then found her way here as well. And I am hoping that this type of a Minnesota family story can help bring even more people into the conversation as an aspiring city councilor. My day job is organizing within immigrant and refugee communities to understand how we are different, how we're the same, and how the government needs to uniquely serve us. This is something that I have deep background in personally and professionally, and that I think that we desperately need moving forward if we want to continue to make progress that brings all of us with it as a city. I hope to bring my direct lived experiences to that work.
Thank you. David.
So my mom moved to the west side of St. Paul in 1987. I was 7 years old, 3rd grade, learned English at a school called Roosevelt Elementary. It's been redone and is now called something else. Anyway, so thank you, St. Paul Public Schools, for teaching me how to speak English. It's pretty good, right? You can't even hear the accent. I've been a home stretch counselor at Clues, so I've helped prepare over 500 people for home ownership. I've been a translator in the St. Paul Public Schools for Spanish-speaking families. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. I grew up in a household where there was food insecurity, domestic violence, police discrimination, believe it or not. But Russ thinks that she can be the voice of immigrants. I've lived more of the injustices and the issues than she has. So Russ, rewrite the article.
Okay, I have a question from somebody in the audience who has lived in St. Paul for over 35 years. They say they have never seen the streets in such terrible condition. What are your ideas and plans to rectify this ongoing dilemma? Excuse me. We'll start with David.
Well, you already heard my story. The rim, you want me to tell it again? The other thing is this. When I was a Metro Transit bus driver, I would bike to the Green Line because my garage was over there in by Target Field, which I've been banned for a year, in case you didn't know that, for just the silliest thing. Oh, my God. Anyway, I would bike down Fairview to catch the train at 5 in the morning because my route started at 6. And I can't even tell you the number of times that I almost just bit it, like over the handlebars, fall off to the side, because that road is a disaster. It's like unsafe. I also drive a moped around town. You might see me in a blue moped with a blue helmet. It's scary. It's a public safety issue. Russ, pave the streets.
Thank you. Shirley.
It is a public safety issue, and it's actually a mobility issue for lots of folks as well, because riding your bicycle in the dark, I mean, I've got like about 48 potholes in a quarter-mile section on my street right now that we've been enjoying for several months. Excuse me. The other thing is I have a friend who has fibromyalgia, and she says the Metro Mobility buses, or the transit, she can't take them right now because the roads are in such poor shape. I also think that when we are trying to attract people to come to live to our city, that the way we take care of our streets is a real reflection on how we manage our budget and what we prioritize. I believe that a budget is a moral document, and so for me, if we aren't fixing our streets, that means that we're putting our money in other places. And one of those places actually is the soccer stadium, is the TIF agreement, because we put $22 million of TIF money into that public infrastructure, and now we threw in almost another $1 million more so we could plant trees there for the private park, as well as money, $730,000 to move the stoplight.
Great, thank you. Mitra.
The thing that I think of is door knocking in Hamlin Midway just the other day, and there was a crater in the road, and somebody had taken some kind of orange traffic thing and put it in the crater so that people would see it and drive around it, so that kids wouldn't fall into it on their bikes, and so that people wouldn't trip into it. And I asked the person who I door knocked, how did that get there? And they said, oh, we found that orange thing and we put it there. So we have a situation right now where people are resorting to desperate measures to try and fix some of the things that they're seeing in our streets. And what I would really like to see is funding to help our public works staff have a really streamlined system for responding to these one-off individual situations where lots of times people are trying to flag things, and I've heard constituents say that they either got a call back or they didn't, or it went in a vortex, or it went in a folder on a piece of paper. Like there's a lot of lack of clarity around how we are responding to those kind of complaints, and so stepping up constituent services around that and funds that support that is important. And I also think that we need to have a more proactive approach to street repair and not just be reactive, but think holistically.
Great, thank you. There have been a number of questions on University Avenue, and the one that's come up most frequently is whether or not you support the city's effort to open more bars on University Avenue. And we're going to start with Mitra.
Yes, I would like there to be more things to do at night in my city, and I would like to be able to take the train to do that. And I also think that I've been following the conversation and hearing people's concerns around, how are we going to make sure that we balance public safety with all those elements. I think that's important too. But I think that this is the type of thing that reflects a gap that we have in our city around just more variety of things to do for more different kinds of people. And I'm running because I want to help us grow our city and be a leader for a future where we have that variety of things that we can do. So I would support thoughtful development of more types of ways that we can have places to go and that people can come visit us to spend their money in our city. I would like to work on that project.
Great, thank you. David.
Yes, I agree with Mitra. the stadium is the epicenter of an entertainment district. And if you don't develop University and Snelling Avenues to enhance or support this entertainment district, we're not going to get the most out of it. So yes, sorry folks that don't like clubs and alcohol, but I am sick of going to Minneapolis to have fun. And by the way, when I go to Minneapolis, I've gotten towed and I've gotten 2 parking tickets. So their policing and their parking people do a much, much better job than in St. Paul. In St. Paul, I can leave my car parked all day, won't get a ticket. So let us create these entertainment venues, get people to come in, and then ticket them so we can make money.
Thank you. Shirley?
Well, like with everything, I do support a balanced approach. I remember when we moved here about 25 years ago, that was like trying to get the bars cleaned up on University Avenue. And I also know that, that's next to a neighborhood. And so, yes, we now have a soccer stadium there. But I know through those conversations when that process was happening, is that the neighborhood also didn't want it to be just a bunch of bars and parking lots, and then that's it. So I do think that the variety is a good idea, but just bars isn't necessarily the variety. That yes, we want a variety of small local businesses where people can make a living and not just have it be an entertainment district. I do appreciate, though, that it is like a longer section, like from Raymond to Rice, and not just right around the soccer stadium, just so that it's not so concentrated. But again, like really working with the neighborhood on what they envision, because there are a lot of empty spots there.
Great, thank you. So transportation is also an issue that's come up quite a few times tonight. What would you characterize as St. Paul's most pressing transportation needs? What would you prioritize? And how would you ensure progress? We're going to start with Shirley.
As I mentioned earlier, as we're talking about transit-oriented development, that we're making sure we're also then focusing on transit funding, and that takes a lot of political will as well. So transit is something that is a forward-looking thing as we are building out our community, something that we need to be focusing on as we are trying to change the way we live now and use our cars less. And the was it on transportation in general? Or
Transportation in general.
And so with planning as well, like let's say the Ford site, for instance, we know that there will probably be a lot of equity money put into that site, and very likely it actually will be owned by somebody in India or China. And so we need to make sure that we're doing the community process on the front end so we get it right, because there are a lot of transportation concerns along Marshall Avenue as well when we're talking about neighborhood nodes and transit corridors, that we are taking into account what does that mean then for the actual transportation.
Great. Thank you. David?
So transportation is very costly. I think MnDOT has the largest budget of any state agency because transportation is expensive. So let's think outside of the box for a second. Instead of giving everybody an hour car or an electric scooter or whatever, have a trolley or a circulator or whatever, why don't we bring what people want to them? Like Shirley said, there are many, many, many vacant commercial buildings in Ward 4 right now. Why are they empty? Why haven't we put a grocery store there? Why haven't we put, I don't know, a movie theater there? Why haven't we put a laundromat there? Or just the thing that people need. That way, they can just walk there. And there is this plan to create a more walkable Midway, Hamlin Midway. So it's coming. It's coming.
Great, thank you. Mitra?
This is an area where I would really like to bring my background as an organizer and also my experience working across levels of government to really serve our city effectively. I think that we have some really great large-scale transit investments that are bigger and connect us to other places, which is really important, like our train and like our A-Line bus and things like that. But there's a lot of gaps in bus service within the city and everyday types of transit like that really matter for people trying to get in and around St. Paul for smaller trips. And so much of the time, the state legislature fails to allocate the amount of funds that we need to really grow those services and be able to reach everybody equitably. And then we see disparities across the city in transit access because we'll make big public investments, but they won't reach everywhere. And we need to fight for it to connect to everywhere. I'd really like to work on those things as a council person. And also this is why growing our city and growing our tax base is a part of that, is that it creates more ways for us to do things like fund the rest of the bike plan, fund other ways that our city can get around besides bus, besides train, that help just grow the diversity of ways we can travel our city.
Thank you. I'm going to read this verbatim from the card. I've lived in St. Paul for nearly 4 years and never have had an opportunity to engage with my city council member. What will each of you do to receive and listen to meaningful feedback from all residents, including non-citizens, low-income people, renters, etc.? We'll start with David.
So Russ's team deleted my email from their email distribution list a while ago. So I get why people ask this question. Because if you're a rebel rouser, a troublemaker, they'll delete you from their communications. I think I've had to request twice now to get added back on. So they don't like you? You're a troublemaker? You email them too much? You call them too much? Delete, block, goodbye.
Are you finished?
Just silence is great. No, it's my time. I've got like 10 seconds left. So I'm somebody who people email me all the time now that I'm doing this. I return every call, every email. And that's what you can expect if you elect me. And I speak Spanish.
Mitra.
I am really running to do this job differently. I think that we need to open up channels of communication, that we need to create more and more ways and places for people to give public input, that we need to think beyond the mainstream system of input and create new forums and town halls and bring a proactive organizing ethic to City Hall. I think that matches the level of change happening in our city right now, that matches the appetite people have to get involved, and what I've seen from talking to folks is people are hungry to just share their opinion. And I think that there are lots of ways to ask people to be able to give their input that are virtual, digital. There's a lot of ways we need to think about it very expansively beyond just asking folks to show up to a council hearing. And I also would like to just be in community all the time. I have given my phone number out to so many people. I have asked folks to call me, to email me. My staff doesn't like how much I've given my phone number out, and I'm going to keep doing it anyway because I actually really think we just need that level of communication. We have to break down that barrier between residents and government. People need an engaged, accessible, within a 24-hour turnaround time council person. That's what I do regularly as part of Constituent Services, and I'm hoping to bring that to our ward.
Thank you. Shirley.
So I would be a full-time council person even though this is a part-time job. That's what I am right now, is actually as executive director of a nonprofit. To me, it's not like a job, it's a lifestyle. So one of the things I've been doing during this campaign is what some of the council people do, where they call it coffee with the council person. I called it coffee with the candidate, where I would just go out and be in the neighborhood so that people could just access me. It's like having open office hours. A lot of the things that Mitra suggested in terms of different formats for engaging people, I think ultimately we always have to remember that not everyone can have their voice heard because maybe they can't make the meeting because they're working their second job or maybe their third job, or that the meeting isn't feeling very welcoming, because I have had people say to me, you know, I went to that community meeting, I was ready to speak, and then the crowd felt so hostile that I didn't feel like I could stand up and speak. So I think it's important as a council person to get out into the neighborhood. People will know who I am and where to find me. I have served 3 terms on my district council, and my council member was never at any of those meetings.
Great, thank you. Also, a lot of questions on taxes, specifically property taxes. I'll read this question again verbatim. I grew up in Newell Park, retired 3 years ago, and moved back to have my property tax go up 27% in 1 year. What will you do to keep our houses affordable? We'll start with Mitra.
One of the things that I think is a consequence of our unwillingness to grow as a city is that a smaller number of the residents are bearing the broader burden of the property tax. And what I really think about is a rising generation of residents who are trying to transition to affordable and attainable home ownership right now and help grow that base of people and are finding it impossible. I am coming from a generation that has had a fundamentally different experience in the economy, that has had a lower return on investment for the education that we paid for than we're actually getting in our paychecks. And the cost of a home right now is not what it was for my parents or my parents' parents. And so I think that being really laser focused on that as someone who is living it is something that's helpful to our council right now. We need to do a lot of things to help support people in attaining affordable homes. We have down payment assistance and mortgage buy-down programs through the city or the state that we could grow and help people make aware that they're available. We need to preserve our existing affordable housing as much as we can because building is costly and we do need to build, but we need to hang on to what we have too. So there's a litany of things that I think we could do, but I'm living this and I'm trying to bring that focus to grow our city for the future. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Shirley.
So I was a renter for the first 5 years. I'm now a homeowner. I have 3 daughters in their 20s, 22, 26, and 29. They're all renters. So I feel this very acutely, as well as I open a property tax bill, and I know what it means when your property taxes go up year after year after year. And as I said, I live next to quite a few potholes. I know what it feels like to have your city services go down and down. So when the question about how do you keep this affordable, how do you keep our houses affordable, there's a multitude of ways in which we look at our housing issues. One of them is to understand that markets change constantly and that we don't always have an effect over that. But when we're making our decisions, that we aren't doing things to actually erode our tax base, because 40% of our general fund is based on our property taxes. And as we are moving forward with our programming for how we're going to grow our city, that we are keeping in mind that we are talking affordable housing, that we don't need more market rate housing, and putting things in that are $4,200 and $4,500 and $3,000 a month is not affordable apartments.
Thank you. David.
So, Mitra, I also voted for the Vote Yes campaign, probably when you were still living in Minneapolis, and this is the second go around. So, listen, we're going to ask from every homeowner $125 a year more per year. We're going to pass $15 an hour, and those costs are going to be passed on to us, so that's another $100 a year per home. We're going to give away more TIF money. We're going to have to offset that. That's $50 more a year. Trash pickup cost is going to double. It already has. So your total in just these 4 things that I've mentioned is $325 a year more. You people are going to get more of that, unless you elect David Martinez. City has a tendency to redo projects. So they'll fix something. Oh, we forgot the rebar. We got to take it all out and redo it. Let's do things right the first time. Let's sit down, plan, and make sure there are no unintended consequences. Russ?
Okay, thank you. So the mayor proposes an annual budget based on recommendations of departments and the budget office. What expertise do you bring to critically review his proposal? We'll start with Shirley.
Well, I touched on some of the TIF conversations earlier that aren't happening. So I am part of this group, a neighborhood group. It's called St. Paul Strong. It stands for Safe, Trust, Responsible, Open Neighborhoods and Generations. That's an approach to good community government. We started back in 2015 because there was lack of transparency and accountability in what the city was doing. One of the things that we discussed a lot was the right-of-way assessment that now you all know about because it changed how the city can assess your taxes. And that's one of the reasons that our tax bill went up so high. But so I understand what tax increment financing means and how it works for the priorities that we set and what we do and don't get with that money. I also understand that one of the things that came out of the right-of-way assessment from the court system is that the pilot program is one of the things that nonprofits have said that they would actually be willing to participate in. That means payment in lieu of taxes. But the city hasn't been engaging the nonprofits in that, and some of them have already budgeted for it for this year. So there's money sitting on the table. So that would be one of the things that I would really be pushing for is let's get those conversations going so we can get that money.
Great, thank you. Mitra?
I think that what's important in our city right now is helping people feel like they have a way to have input on complex decisions, even if they're coming from a background where they haven't worked in those specific things. I think government and democracy is about being inclusive and accessible to everybody, and that means opening up the process and helping translate to people who don't work in government and don't work in large companies or a number of range of places, how they can have a voice in what we're going to prioritize. There's a series of efforts right now to open up that process through engaging people around just community education on how the budget process works. And I think that's a really good thing. And I think that what's important is finding ways for people to tell you in their everyday voice what is happening to them, and then your job as a council person is to translate that and understand what does that mean for the decision I have to make for this particular budget. So I would love to open up the process a little more. I have background in policy and in government work, thinking through how we fund and prioritize things, and I'd like to bring those two things together.
Thank you. David?
I completely lost the question. Can you repeat it, please?
The question is on the budget, that the mayor creates a budget, and what skills do you have to critically review the budget?
Oh, none. You know, I've only managed multi-million-dollar budgets for one of the biggest banks in the country, Wells Fargo, where I worked for 14 years. So I managed a $50 million budget, just chump change. I've also served on the Citizens Budget Advisory Council for our St. Paul Public Schools, which has a larger budget than the city does. I gave recommendations that, had they been implemented, we wouldn't be asking for another $125 from each homeowner. But the schools don't listen. The city councils don't listen. I have a master's degree in business administration from Bethel. I have over 20 years of experience managing budgets. I know how budgets work in the city, and I've made recommendations, but nobody listens. They just want me to go away.
Great, thank you. So obviously you're all here hoping to be elected to the city council. So this question is about the city council itself and how you view how they work. What is working at the city council? What's not working? And what would you like to see change? We'll start with David.
So they've got the insider game down pat. I mean, we've got people married to each other. I describe it as incestuous. The incest game, the insider playing game, come to St. Paul to learn that, because we are the best at that. What else is good about our city council? What else? Anybody? Any ideas about what's good about our elected officials? Oh, they talk a good game. You want to work on your presentation and public speaking skills? You want to schmooze? You want to be a wooer? Go to Melvin Carter's Jibber Jabber school, because he's an excellent speaker. He'll sell you anything, and a lot of you are buying it.
Let's keep things respectful, please. Shirley.
So I talked earlier about one of the things that they passed last week was the resolution on moving forward on housing goals. And that's one thing that I really think that we're actually doing well, because I would like to see the city have more of an organized plan around housing, like Randy Kelly did with his Housing 5000 plan, where it sounds kind of like a vacuum cleaner, but it was a citywide effort that included the affordable housing folks, as well as the nonprofits, the for-profits, our financial institutions, and really having a goal set throughout the community. That's the kind of stuff that I think our city council is working towards right now that I think is really working well. There are 7 members, so you do have to build coalitions in order to get things done. And I've worked with a couple of the council people on things like the boards and commissions. And as a community advocate, I've never been elected to citywide office before. And I actually am an outsider who has just been standing up for community voices and working as an environmental advocate through Friends of the Parks. Have gone to more community meetings than I can possibly count, and testified at City Council, Planning Commission. I've been on multiple boards and commissions throughout the city. So I think I have the skills to take it to the next step.
Great, thank you. And Mitra.
I think that so much of the work of governance is about relationships and being able to hold disagreements with your allies, being able to find unlikely partners, and to know that there are no permanent enemies, there are no permanent friends, but that we are working all toward the common good of our city. And this is something that I have cultivated over a decade of working in organizing, working in schools, which are some of the most politicized environments you could ever imagine, working in Congress in an intractable environment where you have to reach out and find people that are going to be on your team anyway. And I think that I would be positioned well to serve our ward as a person that is going to be able to build those relationships and move our city forward with council colleagues. I am proud to be endorsed by multiple members of our city council in this race, by Councilmember Daitau, by Council President Amy Brenmoen. I'm proud to be endorsed by our current councilwoman Samantha Henningsen, who's one of the unsung heroes of our ward and has been a longtime public servant. And I think that having run as someone who's newer to our community and just running on a vision and hope that speaks to my leadership and what I hope to bring.
Great, thank you. So that concludes our question and answer portion, and I know I wasn't able to ask every question that was asked, but the candidates have all agreed to make themselves available for a short time after the forum and would be happy to engage with you after the forum is finished. And so at this point, we're going to move on to closing statements. So each candidate has 2 minutes to wrap things up, and we're going to start with Shirley.
So I hope this has given you an opportunity to get to know us a little bit, because an important thing about an elected official is we can have opinions on the issues of today, but we don't know what's coming down tomorrow or the next day or in 2 months. Birds swooped into town. Nobody saw that coming until we woke up and there it was. So I have very strong belief system that there is no us and there is no them, that we're all us. I have lived in other places in the world, and we are all one family on one planet, and that we need to work together and look out for one another and take care of one another. That's a value that I hold in my core. And so the work that I do, whether it be as a community advocate, whether it be as a parent, and whether it be potentially as an elected official, is to always hold that close to my heart, that who is not in the room, whose voice is not being heard, and then listening to the people who actually are in the room too, because you're here for a reason. You have ideas, you're intelligent, and Ward 4 has a history of being a very engaged ward, and you deserve constituent services. My first job out of college was with the U.S. Senator and in Washington, and that was our #1 job that he told us every day. We are here for one reason and one reason only, because the voters put us here. And so our job is to listen to them. That's how I cut my teeth on government work, and that is the way that I see this position. This is public service. To me, those words mean something. I am doing this because I am now an empty nester. I have energy, I have things to give, and I love this community, and I want to serve this community in the true sense of the word. So that's why I'm running, and I hope that I can earn your support on August 14th. Thank you.
David.
I actually thought I was last because I went first with my intro, but we've changed it up. Okay. So thank you all for coming. I want to thank Tom Goldstein, and I want to thank Russ Stark, and I want to thank any of you who've served on a board or commission or have gotten involved or have been in elected office, because it's not easy. I mean, how many times did I not attack Russ tonight? A lot. So it sucks. But what I've just done to Russ tonight is child's play in what's happened to me over the last 2 weeks. And some of you in here have been the mudslingers, the ones throwing arrows at me. So thank you, because it's all made me stronger. Russ, you're stronger because of it, right? Mitra, Shirley, you'll be stronger if you're elected. So it truly is a selfless act. You put yourself and your family out there. It's tough business. We're all busy. We all have challenges. Today, I was at Sunrise Banks trying to get a loan so I could get my life back together. They didn't approve it, even though I have a 730 credit score, because all the debts are still, under my name with my wife and stuff, so I have to wait for the divorce to finalize and right? Boring stuff. It says, according to Pew, currently 70% of households in the U.S. are constrained by income, have limited savings, or are challenged by debt. Additionally, 1 in 4 households in the U.S. are excluded from the financial mainstream, amounting to more than 254,000 households in the Twin Cities. So 7 out of 10 of us in this room are in that situation. It's not easy. I know. I was raising 2 kids until I got kicked out of my house. So I've been reading the Bible a lot lately, and this is interesting. So in Genesis chapter 39, verse 7, read from verse 7 to verse 23 when you go home. And it talks about how Joseph was falsely accused by a woman who had come on to him. And then Joseph ended up in jail.
Thank you. Mitra.
I believe that the way that you campaign reflects the way that you are going to govern. And I am really proud of the coalition that our campaign has built in about 6 months of running. For me, I got in this race because I'm living the issues that I see as central to the future of our city, and I have a burning desire to serve everyone in our ward effectively and with a level of engagement that is possibly newer for what our ward's experienced and what our city could be. And I think that when we have worked hard to engage underrepresented people, and that consistently shows up in our organizing and in our work and in the people who have chosen to publicly stand with us, that's a reflection and a preview of what I'm hoping to bring to our council and for our community. I truly believe our campaign and our ward look like our city. They reflect what our community wants, and I am running to be that voice to bring us into the next chapter, to say that there will be challenges, but on the other side of those challenges are also our potential and our promise as a community, and that I don't want to stop until every last one of us has benefited from that potential. And so I'm running to bring that appetite, that energy, that organizing ethic, and a decade of experience now in the progressive movement and in public service to be that leader for the future of our community. I am really grateful to everyone who has chosen to be here tonight, to ask questions and to participate in this conversation. And I just ultimately leave you with the reality that in 2 weeks now, we're going to be going to the polls. If you haven't early voted already, you should early vote for sure. It's going to be so busy. But if you have not early voted, in 2 weeks, we're going to make a decision about whether we continue to move forward as a city or we have the potential to fall behind. And I am running into the future because I want all of us there. I want to write that next 50-year chapter of our city story together. And I am listening, and I am open, and I am grateful for you pushing me, asking questions, and being part of this discussion. Thank you for hosting tonight, and thank you for everyone who's here.
Yeah, thank you. Let's have a round of applause. So, a couple of reminders. As you know, voting is on August 14. Vote in person or vote early. Visit the Secretary of State's website. It's just fantastic. It will give you all the information that you need. Also, I'd like to let people know that this forum will be broadcast on SPNN, Channel 19, and also streamed on Facebook. So stay tuned for air dates and times on that. So let's give the candidates another round of applause. Thank you all for coming.